The first time I came here, I was in jeans and a backpack. One of the challenges of traveling and visiting Kenya is that I'm much more constrained now than I will be. And I think that you can anticipate not only me being back, but probably more important for everybody, Michelle being back, and Malia and Sasha coming back, because they have a great love for this country and its people and its beauty. And obviously I've got family connections. And my hope is that some of the philanthropic work that I do after my presidency is over builds on some of the things that we've been doing now. I'm not going to stop being interested in the young people of Kenya and the young people of Africa and developing the talent and the leaders, talented leaders and entrepreneurs that are going to help make this country and the world prosper. And so you can anticipate that I'll continue to make those contributions where I can. Okay.
Great stuff.
All right. Thank you very much, everybody. Asante sana.
That was US President Barack Obama giving a joint news conference with Kenya President Uhuru Kenyatta. The two leaders covered a lot of ground: counter-terrorism efforts, government transparency with regards to corruption in Kenya, and investment in developing business opportunities for entrepreneurs. Mr. Obama did say that he will expand student and business visas for up to 5 years for Kenyans visiting the US and also for Americans working and studying in Kenya. They'll also push to start direct flights between the US and Kenya, though Mr. Obama didn't give any idea when that could happen. There will be a focus on infrastructure and energy, two key areas of economic growth, and also a focus on improving education, especially for girls. Kenya is set to become part of the US Dream Initiative to keep girls safe from diseases. And Mr. Obama did commend the Kenya president for his efforts in rooting out corruption and also improving government transparency. Of course, the fight against terrorism was a major part of their discussions. Mr. Obama said, "We have reduced the territory al-Shabaab controls and we have weakened the networks, but we need help and support from the Somali government. We need to support them and make them stronger." He also said they need to work on intelligence sharing. The US is going to provide additional funding as well as training. Poaching was also a smaller focus. The US has a ban on elephant ivory, and Mr. Obama said the US will introduce a ban on all ivory in the US. And as expected, gay rights in Kenya was also addressed. Mr. Obama said people should not be discriminated against based on their sexual preference. He said when you treat people differently when they're doing no harm, that's when the path to freedom erodes. Mr. Kenyatta again reiterated that gay rights is a non-issue in Kenya. He said Kenya and the US share many values with regards to democracy and entrepreneurship and family values, but there is something we don't share. He said, and I quote, "It's difficult to impose that on people when they don't accept it, and that's why it's a non-issue." And he said they will overcome other challenges like health and women's education and encouraging entrepreneurs when we can overcome that. Now, we're going to bring in Nima Elbagir, who's been also listening in on this press conference. And Nima, what did you make of Mr. Kenyatta's body language when he spoke about gay rights in Kenya? He seems a little bit uneasy.
Well, it was definitely a tense moment, wasn't it? It actually took the reporter referring to his question again and saying, "Will you answer the question?" And you saw Mr. Kenyatta there looking, as you put it, slightly tense, looking down and saying, "I will do," quite forcefully. But then he didn't pull his punches. He said, "This is not in our culture. Our culture simply does not accept it." And you heard applause there from the Kenyan delegation when he said that. But other than that one point of tension, he seemed to take very well the criticisms and the issues and concerns raised by President Obama. He agreed that it was a necessary issue that needed to be addressed in terms of the allegations and the concerns. President Obama put them quite unequivocally that the counter-terror policy, the actions of the Kenyan security agencies perhaps would be contributing to a fertile breeding ground for terrorists and greater radicalization. President Kenyatta took that very much in his stride and agreed to greater assistance to be part of the package of greater support for Kenya's counter-terrorism policy. He also took in his stride President Obama's comments that corruption, he believed, may be one of the biggest obstacles to even greater economic growth for Kenya. But when it came to gay rights, he simply stated bluntly that this wasn't in Kenya's culture, and he believed that his government and his country had greater priorities: health, sexual health, education for women, equal access to opportunities for women, that all of these priorities were, as far as he was concerned, much higher on his to-do list. And then they would address this issue of gay rights. Lynda.
And as you mentioned, one of their major concerns is tackling terrorism, and particularly al-Shabaab militants. Mr. Kenyatta, as you pointed out, did say that he worried about terrorists finding more fodder, finding more supporters in the region and within Kenya. And it seems that the US is going to offer a great deal more support in the fight against al-Shabaab.
Absolutely. President Obama said that they believe that the capacity of al-Shabaab is degraded, but even degraded, he believes they still pose a danger, and that they must continue pushing on this issue. That their concern continues to be soft targets in the aftermath of the attack on the Greece University back in April, and of course the horrifying attack on the Westgate Mall almost 2 years ago now. That even with a degraded capacity, their ability to cause harm in the targeting of these soft targets. And of course, this is quite a controversial issue here, because the US's travel warnings, a lot of Kenyans are worried that they're impacting the tourism industry, that their impact, and that of course has a direct impact on the Kenyan economy. And President Obama said, well, that's why we want to work together with the Kenyan government to try and tackle this threat, because we can't not issue these travel warnings. These are necessary, and it's our responsibility. But what we can do is try and make sure that the threat itself is contained and diminished. Lynda.
I understand we now have some sound of Mr. Obama and Mr. Kenyatta talking about the gay rights issue. Let's take a listen to this, and we'll bring you back in, Nima. Thank you.
When you start treating people differently, not because of any harm they're doing anybody, but because they're different, that's the path whereby freedoms begin to erode. And bad things happen. And when a government gets in the habit of treating people differently, those habits can spread.
And let's take a listen now to Mr. Kenyatta's response to that question on gay rights in Kenya.
It's very difficult for us to be able to impose on people that which they themselves do not accept. This is why I repeatedly say that for Kenyans today, the issue of gay rights is really a non-issue. We want to focus on other areas that are day-to-day living for our people.
And this, of course, Nima, was an issue that came up ahead of Mr. Obama's trip, and there was a lot of talk about whether Mr. Obama would mention it and whether Mr. Kenyatta would respond to it. What's the mood like? What are people saying in Kenya about this? Is it very much along the lines of Mr. Kenyatta?
Well, actually, interestingly, Kenya, especially not just for East Africa, but across Africa, is very socially tolerant. I know a lot of Kenyans who are out both to their communities, to their families, to their friends. Socially, there are a lot of LGBT functions. There are LGBT activists. In a way, the controversy that's blown up around this issue really undermines the reality on the ground for Kenyans in terms of the space that gay, lesbian, and transgender Kenyans have. It is much greater than, for example, in Uganda, where there have been deaths, there have been very virulent threats against them, but also realistically, it is still not what it needs to be. And that's why the hope was that with President Obama coming here, that he would make a very clear statement about the need for equal treatment under law, about the need for those who are persecuted by security services purely for being openly gay and visibly so, that would be something that perhaps could be debated and dealt with President Obama said that his message across Africa has been consistent and it is unequivocal. As an African-American man, he says he knows too well and too painfully what it's like and what it means when people are not treated equally under law. And President Kenyatta was equally unequivocal in that he believes that this is not only is it not in Kenya's culture, but it is not amongst his government's priorities, Lynda.
A lot was covered, and I'm sure we will speak about it again very shortly. Nima Elbagir, thank you very much for your reporting. We appreciate it.